The low thrum of generators hangs over the forward operating base as 7:15 a.m. eases in. Boots tap gravel in steady lines toward the dining facility, where coffee, steams, and eggs sit a little too firm. The air is dry, the light is sharp, and everyone moves with a purpose that feels practiced. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes from the United States Air Force walks the admin corridor with a clipboard and a quiet pace. She signs morning reports, checks, readiness, notes, and clears a snagged printer like it is part of breathing. Her face is calm, her focus steady, and no one needs to be told what to do twice. She steps into the dining facility for a quick refill and a nod at the hand-washing station. A specialist asks about a form, and she points to the right block without breaking stride. It feels like a normal morning, measured and clean. Back at her desk, she closes out a tracker and scans a duty roster, then lets her feet carry her toward the flight line. The sun lifts over concrete barriers, heat already pressing on the tarmac. Her pace slows as the view opens and the noise of the field finds her. Two UA-60 Black Hawk helicopters sit parked with covers off and cowlings secured. A crew chief crouches by a tail rotor, eyes on pitch links and safety wire that must be right before anything moves. Farther down, a maintenance team begins a C-130 walk around in the standard sequence from nose to tail, every panel and tire given its moment. Morgan watches without stepping past the line where visitors stop. No one reaches for a cockpit that is not theirs, and access stays locked to the crews who own it. Her eyes track each check like muscle knows where to look. Then she turns the clipboard over in her hand and says nothing. The field smells like fuel and dust, and the rhythm feels safe because it is organized. A bird arcs high and fades, and the radio chatter stays low and clipped. The day hums the way routine days do when nothing has gone wrong. She takes one last look at the tail rotor inspection, then at the crew circling the C-130 with patient hands. A breeze lifts grit across her boots. At 8:20, the base will not feel like this anymore. The admin office wakes early, and SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes is already moving before the coffee cools. She frees a stuck tray, resets the printer, and slides a stack of forms into alignment without a sigh. Her name sits on the duty board as Admin NCOIC for a joint task force, and the paperwork flows where it needs to go. She guides a junior specialist through a clearance packet with patient steps. She points to the control number, the required endorsements, and the final routing, pausing long enough for the details to land. The specialist leaves with a checklist and a steadier breath. Morning readiness items come next, and she signs them off with a quiet rhythm. Vehicle status, personnel head count, training notes, all logged and time-stamped. Nothing dramatic, nothing missed. On her way to the dining facility, she holds the door for a small group from United States Army Aviation. First, Lieutenant Ryan Keegan passes with a grin and a throwaway line about admin and lawnmowers. She lets it roll past, offers a professional nod, and keeps walking. She takes a seat near the window where the line of the flight line sits in the distance. She eats without rush, wipes the table, and drops the tray. Her eyes catch a maintenance cart moving by procedure, and she marks that small order in her mind. Back at the desk, she closes one tracker and opens another, then steps out for a few minutes to deliver a folder to operations. The corridor is clean and bright and built for moving information. She greets an officer with the same calm tone she uses with airmen and soldiers. As evening settles the day before the incident, she sits in her room with a laptop open to a TACP communications module. Her fingers enter grid coordinates, confirm precision, and roll through menus without hunting for them. The motions look practiced, like a habit learned somewhere loud. She closes the lid and stacks her notes by the door. Outside, the base hum is steady and level. No one knows what tomorrow will ask for at 7:15 a.m. She walks a short loop past the admin wing and faces the direction of the flight line for a quiet minute. She does not cross any restricted boundary, and no cockpit comes into view. She turns back inside and sets the alarm, and the day tilts toward a change no one mentions. At 8:20 a.m., the base moves like any other morning. A convoy stages at the South Motor Pool while a maintenance team checks wiring on a C-130. hands steady on harness clamps and connectors. Music from a small speaker fades as a sergeant walks by and the rhythm settles into work. The shock arrives without warning. The floor lifts and drops, lights flicker, and the incoming alarm rolls across the compound in a hard, steady tone. A column of black smoke climbs over the west fuel yard and turns the air harsh. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes is already out of admin. She uses walls and barriers, crosses open ground in short bounds, and keeps low where sightlines are open. 3 wounded soldiers near the fence line pull her forward. She goes straight to tactical combat casualty care. A CAT tourniquet comes out of an individual first aid kit, and she places it high and tight on a spurting limb. She turns the windlass until the bleeding stops, secures it, and calls the time as 8:22 a.m. Her voice stays even and clipped. She points a private to the airway and shows a simple head tilt and chin lift until breathing is clear. She tells another to apply direct pressure with gloved hands and to hold steady. Medics arrive at a run, and she gives a clean handoff with mechanism, injuries, signs, and treatment. They take over packaging and movement while she notes the patient response with a quick glance. She does not wait for thanks and is already scanning for the next task. The alarm still pulses, but the first wave of motion has shape now. Security forces tighten the perimeter and vehicles clear lanes for medical traffic. Morgan turns toward the Tactical Operations Center as radios crackle with reports and requests. She reaches the entry and slows for a breath. Inside, voices stack, and screens jump, and someone is looking for direction. The sense is clear that the quiet routine just ended, and she is moving toward the place where the noise must become order. Radios tumble over each other as SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes steps into the Tactical Operations Center. The room smells like dust and hot electronics, and the noise hits like a wall. An officer in charge holds a shoulder that will not lift. A major sits upright but slow, eyes glassy from a concussion, while the director of operations has already been moved for medical care. Morgan goes straight to the map and the main displays without ceremony. She traces impact zones with a finger that does not shake and calls wind from the last update to judge likely secondary hits. She spots a dead slice in the live video feed where a sector should be. She asks a technician to reroute through a backup relay and to confirm the return with a clean heartbeat. Her voice does not rise, yet it carries. She asks for comms discipline with one voice on the net so traffic can be managed and logged. She leans over a sensor console and adjusts timing to clean the picture. She names terrain masking, notes track correlation, lag, and requests time latency compensation to align feeds across nodes. A technical sergeant hesitates because she is not on the command roster. He keeps working as the missing sector snaps back, and the room breathes at the same time. Morgan gives grid references in a steady cadence that sounds like a checklist. She asks encrypted traffic to shift to a backup node and confirms cross-sector visual coverage with short acknowledgments. Reports begin to land in order rather than collide. A runner brings a fresh printout, and a headset goes quiet except for the controller who now owns the net. Screens stop jumping as timing locks in across the displays. The floor steadies under boots that a minute ago were pacing without aim. Morgan keeps her posture square to the map. She answers questions with facts and returns to the board before anyone can turn a reply into a debate. The room starts to move like a team again. Tasks are owned, handoffs are clean, and the noise drops to the level where thinking is possible. Someone glances at the name tape on her blouse and then at the cleared screens. The question of who she really is grows louder, even as her voice stays level. Structure returns one confirmed line at a time. The center of gravity in the room has shifted toward the person who turned noise into a picture everyone can use. At 9:50 a.m., the feeds stutter and wash with noise. A faint cluster of heat blooms near the southern arc, slipping in and out behind smoke drifting off the west fuel yard. Operators lean in as the picture flickers. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes steadies the display by hand. She trims gain, locks the window, and asks for a channel shift to clean the net. The room settles to her cadence. Encrypted traffic moves to a backup node with a short confirmation. She checks that routing and logging follow the change, so nothing drops. The primary net is clearer and easier to control. She calls cross-sector visual coverage and assigns eyes by name and screen. Northwatch confirms clean. South and West report intermittent because of terrain masking and haze. Morgan smooths the timeline and aligns sources. She notes track correlation lag between the thermal and the radar return and requests time latency compensation across feeds. The blob sharpens into a small, low contact, riding the smoke. A comms operator hesitates because she is not on the command roster. Morgan keeps it professional and brief, and the operator follows the checklist. Single voice control returns and chatter drops to working level. She studies the movement pattern and marks it as targeting behavior rather than a wide scan. The contact pauses, noses, and drifts back to the same lane as if checking aim points. That behavior puts people on edge without turning the room loud. She requests eyes on from base defense and specifies the Joint Terminal Attack Controller at Echo Overwatch. Echo reports line of sight on the southern ridge with partial hold because of smoke. Morgan asks for steady glass and clean bearings. Cross-checks build confidence in the picture. Security forces tighten spacing in the southern arc and keep weapons tight until told otherwise. Reports land in order and postures adjust without drama. She keeps the operators on short confirmations. No one freelances and no one doubles calls. The net sounds like one team. The contact holds low and slides under the worst of the smoke. Echo Overwatch reports a small airframe with a steady nose and an approach that looks deliberate. The assessment is a real threat, closing fast, while the room braces for the next decision. The technical sergeant leans over a terminal to check permissions for SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes. A shared directory opens with a personnel record he did not expect to see. The cursor pauses. Then the screen fills with clean lines of data. It lists former rank captain in the United States Air Force, with the call sign Echo 7. Assigned unit shows the 74th Fighter Squadron at Moody Air Force Base. Aircraft reads A-10 Thunderbolt II, with 3 combat tours noted. Decorations follow in precise order. Distinguished Flying Cross. Bronze Star Medal with V device. Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. Medical status is written without drama. Duty limiting medical profile for shrapnel to the left leg that led to medical retirement. Current service reflects enlisted status as a staff sergeant assigned to a joint task force billet. The room goes still in a way that is felt more than heard. Officers and enlisted glance from the monitor to Morgan and back again. The young aviator who joked earlier is quiet, hands resting flat on the console. No one moves to promote her, and no one speaks about authority. Chain of command remains unchanged, and the net keeps breathing. Morgan stays on task with eyes on the threat picture and one hand steady on the map edge. She gives a calm redirect that brings attention back to coverage and timing. The request is short and clear, just enough to move the room. Operators return to confirmations, and the controller keeps single voice control. A new report surfaces on the perimeter feed and clocks tick over 9:55 a.m. The monitors press the next decision close to everyone's face. Respect has shifted toward the staff sergeant who never asked for it, and the work turns with her cadence. At 10:45 a.m., the Tactical Operations Center feels stretched thin. The commanding officer is unreachable. The director of operations has already been evacuated for medical care, and reports keep stacking on the boards. The room needs one cadence. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes requests a patch to the Tactical Air Control Party net and assigns 2 personnel as ground relay. She calls for the Base Defense Joint Terminal Attack Controller at Echo Overwatch to hold line of sight on the southern ridge. Her tone is level and exact. A senior communicator listens on the command circuit and reads back confirmation from wing operations. The net grants Morgan acting officer in charge authority for base defense coordination until relieved. She acknowledges once and gets to work. She sets single net control and marks sectors 4 and 6 as hot. Brevity is standardized and chatter drops to clean acknowledgments. Tasks start to move in sequence rather than collide. Morgan requests the unmanned aircraft feed overlaid on ground radar to build a clearer 3-dimensional picture. She confirms encrypted traffic is shifted to a backup node so logging and routing stay intact. She checks time, latency, compensation to keep sensors and tracks aligned across systems. Cross-sector visual checks roll left to right. North is clear, east is stable, south is intermittent due to terrain masking and smoke, and west is recovering from the earlier blast. The controller reads back each sector with steady timing. She keeps language short and checklists like assign eyes by name and screen, confirm bearings, and push updates at a measured pace. The picture firms up as operators match inputs and clean their windows. First Lieutenant Ryan Keegan from United States Army Aviation falls in with a simple acknowledgement as she calls for tower coordination and airfield updates. She asks for status only and does not jump ahead to flight operations. The tower replies with times and posture and holds for her next call. Screens stop jittering and the noise inside the room settles to a working hum. Tasks are owned, handoffs are clean, and the net sounds like one voice. People can think again. Morgan stands square to the map and keeps the loop tight. The authority question is resolved on net and the team is aligned. The next threat window is already on the clock and everyone knows it. Acting authority confirmed on net. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes keeps her voice even and the room steady. She requests an immediate patch to the counter, small unmanned aircraft systems cell and the electronic warfare cell. The controller reads back connection status and the circuit opens clean. Morgan authorizes a non-kinetic defeat in accordance with procedure. She calls for profile Charlie, with a controlled GPS spoof offset 2 kilometers west-northwest to be held until her mark. Traffic stays tight and the log captures every step. She directs base defense to emplace a thermal decoy in a cleared, empty quadrant. Smoke goes up only to shield friendly positions and to complicate line of sight from the threat. Nothing is used as bait and nothing moves without confirmation. Echo Overwatch checks in from the southern ridge with glass on the lane. Morgan verifies cross-sector visual and reminds the room that only urgent calls will break in. Single voice control holds as operators keep their windows clean. The UAV nose is low in smoke, drifting from the west fuel yard. Radar shows a small return that rides the haze and dips under terrain masking. Morgan notes track correlation lag between feeds and asks for time latency compensation to align sensors. Displays sharpen as timing locks. The radar track shows a subtle veer toward the decoy, while thermal confirms a steady nose that looks focused. Echo Overwatch reports calm visual on a small airframe that is committing to the empty quadrant. Morgan marks the moment and calls execute to the electronic warfare cell. The spoof profile takes effect, and the contact drifts the last distance toward the decoy. She orders the decoy team to hold position and keep the area clear. The payload detonates inside the empty quadrant and throws dust across open ground. No friendly positions are exposed, and the sound rolls away fast. The controller reads back impact, and the log captures time to the second. Morgan keeps traffic tight and asks that only urgent calls break in. She updates the common operating picture with short summaries that place every team inside the same frame. The room exhales, then moves immediately to checks for follow-on threats. Sensors sweep for a second system while base defense resets spacing and confirms ammunition and water. Airfield status remains on hold for now, and tower coordination continues in the background. Morgan directs teams to hold sectors, log the event, and stand ready for another pass if the picture changes. Her cadence stays calm and level. Screens look clean, tasks are owned, and the message is simple. Keep your sector, watch your window, and be ready. The room shifts from crisis stance to controlled maneuver as SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes steadies the net. Security elements hold in Quadrant 6 with a prepared fallback and weapons tight until positive identification. Fire comes only on command in line with rules of engagement, and every acknowledgement is brief and clean. She sets casualty evacuation priorities using a concise 9-line format and pushes the highest urgency first. Routes are confirmed that avoid the west fuel yard and any debris near the blast site. Medics read back patient counts, pickup points, and marking methods with simple, exact replies. Morgan calls for fuel resupply inside a safe corridor and confirms that engineers have cleared what blocks the lane. A maintenance lead reports convoy posture and spacing for the run. Traffic control points open and close on schedule, so vehicles are not exposed longer than needed. Her cadence stays checklist-like, and the radio reflects it. Teams report set, move, and complete with no extra talk. The Tactical Operations Center maps each step to the log, so the picture stays honest in real time. She shifts to the aviation picture and asks airfield operations for status, while the control tower holds the line. Counter Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems reports green, and she waits for the official airspace green call before any rotary wing launch. The tower confirms posture and time, then clears the next coordination call. Airspace goes green, and Morgan coordinates a limited sweep for a UH-60 Black Hawk, flown by First Lieutenant Ryan Keegan of United States Army Aviation. Tower clearance is required with route deconfliction against base defense sectors and a hold short if any track pops on radar. Altitudes, headings, and orbits remain generic and avoid hot sectors. Keegan responds with professional respect and runs his checklist without hurry. He calls ready only when the aircraft and crew are set. The sweep lifts with a controlled departure and a clean handoff from tower to the operations net. Morgan keeps single voice control as ground teams adjust spacing and sensors watch for any second system. She logs the event and tasks a follow-on check for the sweep route and the medical corridor. The tone across the base is calm, competent, and disciplined as a dangerous place becomes safe again. The all-clear comes at 11:32 a.m., and the Tactical Operations Center lets out a long breath. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes removes her headset, logs the event with times and actions, and hands the net to the watch with a clean summary. Chairs slide back. Screens dim to normal brightness. People refill water bottles and settle into after-action rhythm that keeps the picture honest for the next team. She checks the incident log one last time, files, the overlay captures, and confirms custody of records with the controller. Her tone stays even as she steps off the floor and returns equipment to the rack. At 2:30 p.m., rotor wash pushes dust across the flight line as a UH-60 Black Hawk settles near the operations area. A senior officer from the United States Air Force steps down and walks with intent. He is Colonel Patrick Nolan in a flight suit with command insignia. His eyes move from damaged barriers to scorched ground near the West Fuel Yard and the medical tent still working under shade. He reaches Morgan in front of soldiers and airmen who form up without fanfare. Ceremony stays correct, as the colonel does not salute a staff sergeant first. He states that wing operations confirmed her acting authority for base defense coordination, and that her decisions preserved people and equipment. He presents a challenge coin and a short commendation, then offers a firm handshake that says the same thing without extra words. Applause rises in a clean wave and settles. If present arms is used, a senior non-commissioned officer calls it once, holds it for a beat, and brings it down proper. First Lieutenant Ryan Keegan from United States Army Aviation steps up after the formal moment and gives a quiet nod that carries weight. The exchange is professional and brief, and it lands because the work was real. The administrative follow-through starts at once. The commendation will push through channels with the right references and witness statements, and the coin entry will meet unit policy. Morgan keeps the spotlight short and steers attention back to post-event checks. She points people to lessons learned, sensor timing, and perimeter cleanup that still matters before the sun drops. The base returns to work in measured lines. Crews reset equipment, update logs, and check sectors, while maintenance teams clear lanes that got cluttered in the rush. The light softens across concrete and canvas. The moment holds because it is correct, not flashy, and because everyone here understands the cost of keeping a place like this standing. At 5:40 p.m., the forward operating base exhales as the light softens over concrete and canvas. The generator hum settles into the kind of steady that lets people hear their own breath. The heat lifts in slow waves off the gravel. Medics work under shade with sleeves rolled and gloves on. They check bandages, adjust tape, and log vitals with pens that do not hurry. A litter team rehearses a short carry, then returns equipment to the rack in quiet order. Security forces walk the line along barriers that still smell faintly of smoke. They check sectors by habit and touch each post with a gloved hand before moving on. Radios click in short bursts that sound like routine again. Small maintenance tasks stitch the field back together. A panel latch gets tightened, a hose gets coiled, and an empty pallet is hauled clear of a lane. None of it is dramatic, but all of it makes the place feel solid. SS Sergeant Morgan Hayes, from the United States Air Force, moves along the flight line with a measured pace. A crew chief gives a nod as she stops at a fuel rig and secures a loose strap. A small act that says, care is a habit, not a moment. The camera lifts to a pale sky, where an A-10 Thunderbolt, 2 arcs far outside the base. The sound is a soft drone from General Electric TF-34 turbofan engines, legal and distant, part of training that respects airspace and procedures. There is no firing and no show of force. First Lieutenant Ryan Keegan from United States Army Aviation steps beside her for a quiet moment that needs no words. Respect sits plain between them. She returns a nod and turns back to the work in front of her. Across the base, the routine returns one checklist at a time. Logs are updated, sectors checked, and the watch is handed off cleanly. The hum of the field takes over again while the sky fades to a calm line, and an unsung staff sergeant walks back into the ordinary with the job done. Authority is proven when alarms sound, not by the name on a door. That truth lived on the ground between 7:15 a.m. and 2:30 p.m., when a steady voice and clear steps held a base together. Calm hands made space for good decisions, and good decisions kept people alive. SS Sard Morgan Hayes of the United States Air Force did not chase a spotlight. She followed procedure and let the results speak. The base did not need volume. It needed order, timing, and trust. Early contact brought blood and dust. Tactical combat casualty care took over at the fence line with a combat application tourniquet placed high and tight. The windlass turned until bleeding stopped, and the time called so the record stayed clean. That is how care begins in the field. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, the net found discipline. Traffic on the Tactical Air Control Party net stayed brief and useful so the picture could be read. A joint terminal attack controller at an overwatch position kept eyes on the southern ridge and fed bearings that mattered. A small, unmanned aircraft closed through smoke, and panic would have been easy. Instead, the Counter Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems plan moved through the electronic warfare cell for a non-kinetic answer that matched capability and authority. The decoy was placed where it hurt nothing, and smoke shielded friendly positions instead of posturing. No rotor lifted until the airspace was safe. Airfield operations and the control tower worked their checklist, and the call for airspace green came before a single blade turned. Only then did a UH-60 Black Hawk launch for a limited sweep with routes deconflicted against base defense sectors. Casualty evacuation followed a 9-line that pushed urgency first and moved people the right way. The numbers, locations, and markings were read back and logged. The work felt plain from the outside, and that is the point. Thank you to service members and to families who carry the weight that does not show. Your routines and your patience make days like this possible. Your quiet work does not miss. If this story reached you, share it with someone who has been overlooked. Subscribe if you want more calm in the storm moments built on real procedure and human care. Leave a note about a time when steady work made a difference and taught you to breathe. Hold one last image as the base settles at 5:40 p.m. Logs are updated, sectors checked, and the watch hands off cleanly, while an A-10 Thunderbolt 2 hums far away on General Electric TF-34 engines. This channel will keep telling human stories with accuracy and heart, where small choices and precise actions matter most.